your girl is back again talking about pay. Yes, flight attendant pay would always be a topic on this channel because when it comes to our money, there's always so much to talk about. How not to be a broke flight attendant. In today's video, I do want to talk about how you can manage or some of the things you can do so that you don't put yourself in a situation whereby you end up being broke or struggling as a flight attendant, because I know there are tons of videos out there talking about how bad the pay is and then how flight attendants are struggling out there and literally practically broke. Before I jump into the first point, I do want to say that to a large extent, because people have certain perceptions about this job, right? They expect it to be glamorous, fun, exciting, visiting different countries, living your best life. I think because people have that idea about this job, they potentially end up having to put up a facade, like essentially living beyond their means just to keep that glamorous lifestyle going. It might not necessarily be intentional, but it's just one of those things where if you find yourself in London, you feel the need to explore, to eat, to go to restaurants and do all that good stuff. Who wants to take a meal prep from Seattle somewhere to London to go eat there? Why would you want to take lasagna you made at home in the US all the way to London to go eat it there, right? So that's the thinking. Why don't I just have breakfast and lunch in London? Why should I bring my own food when I can just eat there, right? But it's one of those things where I get it, I understand it, but there's a time and a place for everything. And I feel that sometimes people rush too much to enjoy that glamorous lifestyle because it's right in front of them. They rush to take a bite into it. And I think that's what usually leaves them in a pickle and puts them in a situation whereby they end up struggling. Although that might not be the only reason. If you're considering becoming a flight attendant, I know this might be hard for many people, but I'm just going to try and talk about this in a general sense as possible, because a lot of people that talk about managing money, how to manage your finances and everything, usually talk about this thing, which is managing your debt or getting yourself to the point where you're debt free. And even if you do have to have any debt, it's potentially your mortgage. If it's not your mortgage, potentially try and get those cleared before you jump into this career. I'm not saying that once you become a flight attendant, you might not potentially make the money to be able to take care of those debt. But what I'm saying is that when you're coming with a clean slate like that, except for mortgage, because it's practically like paying rent, when you're coming with so much debt, there's always so much pressure on you financially. And also with the way this job is, training is not paid. Even if you're paid, it's a stipend. Even if you're paid, it's the minimum wage of Atlanta, like my airline does. So it's one of those things where this is one of the careers that when you're starting, the start is very slow in terms of income, in terms of a financial standing. And even if you go through training, that's 6 weeks or 7 weeks or 8 weeks of training, your first month might not bring you the income you're expecting. Second month might not, because mind you, you're trying to adapt to the lifestyle of this job. Your third month might not bring you the money you're expecting, right? Even your sixth month might not bring you the money you're expecting. So it's one of those things where this job is such that you have to gradually put yourself or immerse yourself into it. And it's hard to do that when you have debt holding you back. That's why I see that one of the first things you should consider doing is clearing all your debt, especially if you're already employed and you have a job that practically pays you okay, but you just don't enjoy it and you want a switch. You want to go into a different career, right? So that's where I'm coming from with regards to the debt aspect. Using myself as an example, when I decided to become a flight attendant, I was debt free. Although I wasn't employed because I quit my job like months before I eventually ended up going for training, I was debt free. So while I was in training, the only thing I had to worry about were my bills at where I live. I don't have a car note either. And I don't have like any outstanding loans or consumer debt or anything, credit card debt and stuff like that. So it made it easy for me to go through training, because while in training, although the pay was not good, I didn't necessarily have to worry about so much financially. So using my experience as an example, I feel like it set me up in a positive way compared to somebody who's probably coming in already in debt, can barely afford to pay for their bills while they're in training. The second thing that I did also with regards to money when I was going for training is that I had saved up to be able to take care of me during training. So whether training was paid or not, I had enough funds to take care of my expenses while I was in training and at least 2 to 3 months after I was out of training and on the line. So money wise, I wasn't necessarily stressed out much because I had enough funds to cover my expenses for me. If you jump into it and you don't jump into it at the right time, it might cause you a lot of stress, especially if you end up working with an airline company that doesn't pay well enough. Make sure you have an emergency fund to cover at least 3 to 6 months of your expenses, essential expenses. I sound like a financial guru, like somebody who talks about finances or whatever, but I promise you, whatever they talk about, the people out there talk about how to manage your finances is the same thing that you should apply to your life as a flight attendant. Whether you're working as a flight attendant or not, you always have to make sure that you have enough money put aside to cover 3 to 6 months of your expenses. The reason why I say this once again is that when you're going through training, you're not getting paid. When you get on the line, you're not necessarily getting paid. And for the most part, we're not getting paid our entire time that we spend at work. So in the beginning, before you figure out what trips works best for you, before you figure out how to bid for high credit trips that make you more money, before you figure out the money situation when it comes to this job based on how to build your calendar or your trips so that you can make the best out of it, you need time to learn those things. And in the meantime, you have to make sure you do have a security blanket, which is money to cover your essential expenses so that you're not so stressed out about trying to make money, trying to overwork yourself as a flight attendant just to make the money to take care of an emergency that might come up. That to me also adds to the stress, which makes people broke, because if you don't have any money set aside for your emergency and then you end up, your trips get canceled. And for us, for example, your trip is honestly, if you ask me, only guaranteed once you work them. If you have a trip on your calendar, it might be worth $2,000, but until you work it fully, that money is not guaranteed, because if one, the trip gets canceled, you can either elect to pick up another trip in place of it, or you can go on reserve. We can go on call for that period of time, right? So it's one of those things where they say your pay is guaranteed, but it's really not. My pay being guaranteed to me means that if whatever reason this trip gets canceled, automatically pay me my money. But unfortunately, that's not the case, at least not with my airline. It means that the trips you have or you're planning on working are not guaranteed, which means your income monthly is not guaranteed until you actually work those trips for it to be guaranteed. So you have to make sure that you have at least 3 to 6 months of your expenses saved so that you don't end up being broke or being stressed out over money. I personally, when I was a flight attendant, I also budgeted, right? So I always had an allotted amount for everything. I knew what my essential bills were. So once I budget, it gives me a fair idea of what my basic expenses would be for the month. So if I wanted to splurge or wanted to have money on my layovers to spend to do whatever it is, I already knew how much my essential expenses would be, what my potential value or income value for the month was going to be compared to any other money that'll be left over. So if I know that my monthly expenses amount to about $3,000 total, I knew that throughout the month, if I want to save as well, I have to work and earn more than $3,000 that month in order to have my expenses covered, something to save, and then something to do whatever it is that I wanted to do. So budgeting also will give you a clear picture of what your expenses would be as compared to what your income is, and if you can afford the lifestyle that you're trying to live out here. People, for me, I think feel like budgeting means you're restricting themselves or they can't spend as much as they want to, but I feel like it rather does the opposite. It actually tells you, makes you aware of where your potential opportunities are, essentially. I say budget because then you have a fair idea of where your money is going, what you can afford to do, and what you cannot afford to do. I meal prepped a lot, and I've said this in other videos. I could count on one hand for the past a year and 8 months that I've been flying, that I can count on one hand that I actually ate out. I always meal prepped. Even when I had the intention of eating out, I still sent food because anything can happen. I meal prepped because I knew that if I had to buy airport food or food at the layovers that I was going to, it was going to cost me money. Ordering room service can be very, very expensive too. So I knew I wanted to save money, and I wanted to make sure that I did not put myself in a situation whereby I'm living a glamorous life out there, eating out, having coffee here and there, and then I'm broke. So I meal prep. It's very, very cost effective. And meal prepping doesn't necessarily mean that you cooking the food yourself. It can simply just be going to Trader Joe's and getting something that you can eat, but it's definitely way cheaper than buying it at the airport or at the layover. Have an expense budget for your layovers, right? So we do get paid when we're in our layover. We do get paid a per diem, which is about $2.85. All the other times from your layovers and stuff like that, all that time you're getting a per diem of $2.85 per the hour. So essentially your layover pay might amount to, let's say, $100, $80, $50. The whole point is that if you think of it that way, then it puts things into perspective, knowing that, okay, so if the layover for this entire trip, it's only paying me, let's say $100, and I'm going out to eat every single day. I ate breakfast and dinner on each day outside. If each day is costing me, let's say $50 for breakfast and dinner, that's $150. So essentially whatever pay I was supposed to get on this trip for my layover, I've overspent. That's the first thing. So this is why people people end up being broke sometimes because they're essentially overspending. So for me, my methodology is that if I know this trip has a layover pay or time away from base pay of $50, then I know that if I want to buy anything outside of the meal prep that I sent with me, it has to be within that $50. If I go anywhere above $50, it means it's costing me more money to be on this layover or this trip. You have to have a budget. Know that this is the maximum you're willing to spend and don't be pressured to go overboard. Live within your means. I feel that people do the most when they become flight attendants sometimes. And I get it, not everybody is living beyond their means or whatever, but I feel like sometimes you have to know where your financial standing is, where you are financially, and spend accordingly. If you end up, or if you already started this job with so much debt, you have to figure out a plan or a strategy to kill that debt so it releases your income, giving you more spending capabilities. So if you know you can't afford to eat out 3 times a day, why are you eating out 3 times a day? People see other seasoned flight attendants who are living their best life because they've put in their time of getting the bare minimum as pay, and now they're at the point where they're making good money. So they can afford to go grocery shopping in Paris or London or Amsterdam or Singapore, wherever it is. They can afford to eat out the whole trip because their pay is not your first year, second year, or third year pay. They're earning 5th year pay, 6th year pay, 7th year pay, 8th year pay. So their lifestyle will definitely be different from yours. Thank you all for watching today's video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.
Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our